This is Real World Product Management. Hello, everyone. This is yet another episode of the Real World Product Management, and I have Richard on the call with me. Richard, hi. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi. Yes, this is Richard.
Hey, Richard. Thank you. So first question, and to kind of understand why we're talking to you.
Sure.
Can you tell us more about who you are, what your role is, and what kind of organization you're working with?
Yeah, of course. Richard as well. I work out of San Francisco and here in the Bay Area, here in California. I work for a company called BugCrowd as the product manager. BugCrowd, we do crowdsource cybersecurity. We started initially as a bug bounty company. A brief statement of what that is we connect hackers with companies and facilitate vulnerabilities and distributing that across the two user bases. So yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You work with any big names, or this is more of a small scale operations? Because from what I know, large companies like Facebook, Microsoft, they have their own bug bounty programs.
That's right. So we work with actually quite a large enterprise customers. We work with Netgear, TripAdvisor, Netflix, to just name a few enterprise. But we work with the mid market as well, where a company doesn't have the resources to have security team like a Google, like a Facebook, to run their own bug bounty. So we come in the middle and help them out. Wow,
that's pretty cool. And by the way, thank you. We all want to live in a more secure world.
Right.
So talk me through your kind of start of your career as a product manager. How did you end up being a product manager? And I seem to have a number of stories from different people.
Sure.
And not two are the same. So I'm really interested in hearing what's up with you.
Yeah. So I joined BugCrowd a little over 4 years ago now. When I joined, the company was relatively small. We had about 40 individuals across the world, mostly based in San Francisco. And they didn't have a head of support. Support was managed across multiple departments within the company. When I joined, it was collapsing all of them down into a single individual. And that was myself. When I joined, we were using Intercom as a support channel. We were mainly email based, and we supported both the researcher community, the customer base, and internal stakeholders. And through my first 3 years of being in support, I built out the team, built in the different support metrics that was needed for leadership to have insight into what we could fix. Through that experience, I learned a lot of empathy. I heard this comment, empathy tank. End of the day, when I would go home to my girlfriend, the empathy tank would be exhausted. Through 3 years of doing support tickets, it's very transactional. And through that process, I came to know the platform quite well. I knew the in and outs, I knew the faults, I knew where to not to talk about. So when 3 years came about roughly, I felt like this was not as fulfilling because I couldn't really fix the problem. I reached out to product engineering and had a pretty frank discussion on what can support do beyond just answering tickets and submitting requests into the engineering to be a part of the backlog. So product became the natural reaction. A lot of PMs at the time recommended, hey, why don't you come on our team? You know the platform well, you know the stakeholders across the company, even our customers in certain cases. Join product, you have now engineering resources backing you to alleviate some of the problems you saw in support. So that's kind of my bridge into product management.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people coming over from BA. World. I myself came in from software development project management world. Now we have somebody coming from support, which is cool. I think now that you said it, I actually think it's one of the best ways to get into product. BA is probably the same because BA stands in a place where you collect the information and it kind of like input into the product. And as a support person, you stay at the output or kind of at the beginning of the feedback loop, which is also a pretty good place to be. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so you actually made a transition and you joined the product team. How many product managers did you guys have there?
When I joined, we had one product manager managing roughly 20 engineers at the time. So he was well overworked, completely inundated with all these requests, obviously unable to prioritize and fulfill. And I was the second one coming up on board.
Was there any kind of a structure around that? And by structure, I mean developers broken into teams that are working on the specific pillars, such as epics, features, individual products. How did that work?
Sure. The structure was, we had a team in San Francisco and we had another team in Australia, and they would tackle different themes within the product. If one team would focus more on the researcher side, another customer, and another internal products. So it was divided in that sense. Yeah.
So one product manager was overseeing everything.
Correct. A lot of work on his front. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you guys structure the work once you've joined and there was two of you now?
Yeah. So that transition was interesting. It was during a holiday season. So he was off on holiday and I came in and kind of just took on what was the backlog at the time and what was already being worked on in epics and sprints for that quarter. Working on products or working on improvements within the product was a lot more seamless for me because I knew what was going on. We didn't have the idea of new products at the time. We were still working on a backlog to help create small fires, to put out small fires. So when I joined, those were the first forefront of my mind. How can we alleviate the short-term pains that the customer and the user base were encountering? So that's kind of what I picked up right away, and I felt really accustomed to that. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So you started at the more tactical level, which is understandable, and that had you kind of grow into doing more strategic stuff, as I understand.
That's right. Correct.
Given that you're still there, I'm assuming, generally speaking, it went well. What do you think was the largest challenge, or how we ask in the enterprise world, what kept you up at night during those times?
I think adoption was really key in the beginning. We were more consultative, I guess, in a sense. They were people, customers, users, internal stakeholders would request things and expect a turnaround time with a deliverable. That's not the motion that our product leader wanted to, the cadence that we wanted. For certain requests, sure, there would be transactional, but certain ones that product managers should be driving. Products should be driving the themes and how we build out. So we noticed adoption. We would build a problem would come in. We would build it in a sprint, and then it would sit on the wayside and not be actually utilized. So we saw that right away. Like, were they using the feature? Were they using the chart that we built and spent engineering resources, actual currency, money? And that became a sticking point early on.
Okay. Since you've mentioned the real money, one of my previous guests mentioned that based on their structure and their ways of doing things, they had an actual dollar value on each support ticket. Each support ticket actually cost them real money. Was there anything like this in your case, or was it just the resource use that cost you?
It was more of a broader resource. No one knew how much they were spending. It was a request, and they were taking money out of the bank, but never putting any deposit or anything back in. And we didn't have a monetary idea. We didn't have a dollar in each feature, but I do like that idea. I guess it does work in certain cases.
Yeah, and I love that idea because it translated directly to the products I am managing in my current company, or rather managed until the last year in my current company. So it definitely makes sense. So when you were, something you mentioned, you said there's there was no perception of monetary value on features. My understanding is there's no ROI on any kind of development work. So how do you guys measure how successful the product was? What was the success metrics or framework? Maybe you've used the framework. Maybe there was something that made sense to you at the time. What was the success measure as the whole?
I think over time we did learn to use ROIs and metrics to drive them. And maybe I'm speaking in the short-term window. Some requests would come in tactical with things that we have to do, RFEs, requests for enhancements for current customers. We would have to tackle those for the deal to continue to renew the deal. ROI, we base it on, it came to top of line. We talked about top of line a lot. How can we drive revenue? How can we expand to adjacent marketplaces? And then those kind of funneled into our features and epics. And that's kind of how we derived it early on. I think now we're at a better place in the company and the teams. We talk about ROI and KPIs a little more, and it's a lot more defined in today's world.
Okay. So you're not using any specific thing, but you're just trying to tailor it to the monetary value. We understand your answer.
I mean, there's frameworks, right? We can talk about the different frameworks that exist on how to prioritize work, and we've used some of them. I think certain PMs in the company today have that intrinsically in how they look at a feature and a request, but there's no standard across the teams to utilize a certain framework.
Interesting. Do you? I don't want to intrude too much, but why do you think you guys don't have a standard? Is that because you're lacking some kind of a central product governance, or is that because of inherent nature of things that those product managers are managing? What's the story there?
Yeah, I think it breaks down to what I focus on personally, and I think it goes toward the service engineering side, which is my team, and we focus on shorter iteration, lower time to value versus other PMs that are working on new products, and their validation points are what's the adoption from the market, from the security industry as a whole. So when I speak, I'm probably speaking more in my lens versus the other PMs, but the broader theme I think that can be spoke about by leadership, and I haven't intrinsically felt that in my own purview. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you for the answer. I really appreciate it. So, talk to me about how you prioritized then and how you prioritize now, or rather, let's even go a little higher. How do you guys managed your roadmap when you started versus how you guys doing this now? What was the transition? So basically, talk me through what was back then. How do you guys get to the current state, and what do you see as an ideal state, if you can?
Sure, of course. So previous state, we had a lot of fires, a lot of tickets that would come in and deviate on the product roadmap. We had a sense of product roadmap many years ago before I joined, but it was often deviated because of requests that would come in pretty urgently. Emails would be called urgent or critical or whatever it may be, to signal to engineers we should drop everything and focus on this. This oftentimes distracted engineers from working on the overarching idea of how to move the platform forward. When service engineering was introduced by my manager, it was an idea that we would have two separate roadmaps, one platform, more product-focused roadmap on where the vision of the platform will eventually go, and a service engineering roadmap or a service roadmap. The service roadmap would be inherently meant for more short-term wins, iterations that don't take months, but days versus weeks. And that's how it's kind of deviated since. The team I work on is based out of Costa Rica, and they understand the platform from top to bottom, and they do know the work that they're getting is not elongated in a quarter metric. They do understand that the deliverables we have is smaller wins to make the operations, to make the customer, to make the researcher feel that their requests are being heard and actually being actioned. So that has been the major shift in perception from the market and perception within the company.
Wow, I'm impressed. Having two separate roadmaps, one for support, technically that's what it is.
Yeah.
So one's for support and one's for feature development. That's an interesting approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is basically what it evolved into. You guys kind of started that almost intuitively, I guess, and then that's what it evolved into. That's what the current situation is.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that your engineers would be getting all these urgent, super urgent, and critical emails that was disrupting your natural flow, let me step back and ask: did you have any software development process in place? Anything along the lines of Agile, Scrum, any of that stuff?
There was an Agile built into the team. There was that notion. There was a Scrum leader that managing the work that was coming in. So we did have that idea, yes.
The idea, or was it actual Scrum or actual Agile? Because from my experience, there's a lot of frameworks, a lot of governance that is called Agile, where it's just time-based waterfall. Okay, so we're doing waterfall for 2 weeks now. So I just want to make sure I understand your situation.
Yeah, I guess I can't really speak to it too much. I came in and was introduced to my team, and I knew the feature teams were a part of the Agile, and they were running with their 2-week iterations, and then I was running not in the same parallel. Though we did do sprint reviews together. The work was not always the same.
Okay. No, it makes sense because you guys are managing completely different types of work, so to speak. So it's totally understandable that you guys were not aligned. Although I would argue, and again, maybe it's just my personal experience, I would argue that you still need some kind of a connect or some kind of a sync between the teams, because you guys were fixing what they were producing.
Sure. Yeah.
So to me, they should be really nice to you in the sense of syncing up.
I mean, that's through the PR process, the peer review process of code review and code quality. All the engineers, it was more round robin, so they did know what we were producing, and the engineers, the service engineers, were focused on. So I think there was a back and forth appreciation for what the team in service was actually accomplishing, and how they're looking at it slightly different. So yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you then a slightly different question. This is me. I used to be a developer many years ago, and I'm kind of I'm kind of the person that likes doing new things or discover new things, which is why I ended up being a product manager.
Sure.
I'm very, very heavily rooted in R&D and figuring things out. And as a developer, I had the same mentality. Yep. And whenever I was asked to fix other people's code or other people's problems, I wouldn't be very negative, but I would get very defensive. And of course, it's not a good character trait,
right?
But it is what it is. I used to be like that, and I'm just curious. Aren't your developers at least partially resentful? I'm not sure how to soften that word, so I'm just going to use resentful for now.
Yeah.
Aren't they at least a bit resentful, saying, "Hey, we're always fixing things. We're never building new things, and we want to build new things, so let somebody else fix the bugs"?
I think so the tickets itself is we split it into defects and then improvements and feature improvements. So the defects, sure, there comes, I am sure if they get inundated, if their work was 80-20 and 80% of it was defect, I bet there would be that resentment instilled over time. But the team does focus on feature enhancements as well. So I don't know the percentage split today, but they do focus on once they see a defect and how can we improve it on the user experience. We do have that notion as well. So it's just not fully focused on defects. And I see very similar parallels with security engineers. When you see a vulnerability, you have to a Coinbase, a security engineer at Coinbase recently did a presentation at AppSec Cali, and his notion was we cannot criticize our engineers for the vulnerabilities that come out. We have to be able to do better. It's not a person that did it. It's how can we create a system that just prevents them from actually creating those vulnerabilities from the beginning. You can't blame the individual for a vulnerability that comes out and actually has $1 million effects to the company. It's what kind of governance do we have in place to prevent that from happening? So, yeah.
It makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So once you guys established that, how do you start, or where do you guys ended up on managing the roadmap? I mean, from what I hear, it sounded like you were very focused on fighting fires, and it's not a bad thing. Yeah. If our knowledge is any indication, we would argue that about 80% of any IT is firefighting.
Sure.
And that's basically, that's where some of my products, the products I co-manage, that's where they are rooted in. So it's a normal thing. I'm just wondering, how do you guys pushed for moving your product forward? Or what was the situation when you realized, hey, we're not really doing anything new. We just keep, rehashing the existing thing without moving things ahead?
Yeah, I think that's when we started introducing new product managers. At the time, we had two, and my counterpart was focused on how we can push the platform into another evolution, another version. I was trailing behind, following any misses that they were unable to capture. We hired two more product managers to focus on that vision, some more outward focusing. How can we improve payments to researchers? How can we build out more SDLC API endpoints to help customers facilitate vulnerabilities into the developers' hands? So we did have that concept of how can we evolve. We were just capacity constraint in that sense.
Since you've mentioned that word, I feel like I'm obligated to ask now, who owns the vision for your product? Or who owns it now?
I think all the PMs own a piece of it. We do have a head of product that owns a vision. It comes from all versions, right? There's the idea of bottom-up product views where PMs and support will derive new ideas and bubble it up into the product. It could be top-down. Leadership can say, hey, please do this, and PMs go off and scrambling and developing it out for the user base. I think it's a mix of both. Who owns it? I think end of the day, the customer and the users own a bit of it, and how we can improve it. But all the product managers own a piece.
Interesting. It's almost like a co-op ownership by a committee. Interesting. In many cases in the enterprise, at least that's what I'm seeing, vision is a collaboration between the product management office or product manager or head of product, and the business. Business being whoever makes money off of a product, because it's definitely not a product organization. So that's where the vision kind of stems from. It's interesting that you're saying that product management owns it. Literally like a co-op, like shareholders, everybody owns a bit. It's definitely not the way I would imagine. I imagined it before this episode. Yeah. So thank you for that. That's interesting.
I think there is a governance. We do have an idea of PRB, product review board, where all the PMs and any stakeholder within the company can present new ideas to the exec board, to leadership, and there would be a voting process. I guess co-op is fun. You mentioned that it is a very interesting idea, and it might line up in parallels in certain use cases. The governance we have is a meeting where any stakeholder, myself, all the PMs, can present new ideas, new functionality that requires company buy-in. When that actually happens, people can ask questions, leaders can question if this tactic, if this phasing makes sense. And that kind of derives how the product starts moving. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because I was actually sitting here thinking, how do I ask this question? And you literally led me to it.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna ask it straight up. This kind of internal sales pitch that you guys are doing to stakeholders. How much do you do? How much do you utilize data-driven approach? In other words, do you collect certain amount of data and then present it to the board or however you guys call it?
Yeah.
And then say, hey, data points to this direction. Let's do this. Or are you experimenting? Let's say we've built a couple of prototypes and this is what we have. And we think this prototype makes more sense than this and this, but we're showing you all three as an example, right? Or do you guys just go with the product manager gut feeling? Because it's totally is a thing. We've discussed this in some of the previous episodes, and we agree that it's a thing. Product management gut feeling has existed, especially people who've been in product management capacity for a long time. So we kind of feel when things are right or wrong. What do you use? And it's okay if you use a combination of all of the above, but just walk me through how you guys deal with that.
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, we do have metrics. We have analytical information on clicks and throughout the platform. I think that helps inform our decision. When I was in college, one of my professors has mentioned customers are not always right. In the sense, we do hear feedback from customers, but are they right in the case that they're requesting this functionality? So we do go in the metrics and start deriving that, hey, what they're telling us, does that actually line up with what we're seeing in the platform and interaction that we're seeing? So that side is the metrics being pulled out. The other side is a lot of PMs have that innate feeling already. They can feel like this is not going to go well. It can be changed. So myself being at the company for a couple of years, I do have that. I do empathize with the users. I do understand that without actually peeling away and looking at the metrics. But yeah, so it's a little bit of both. It's mixed. Yeah.
Awesome. So it's a tricky question. I'm wording it right up. Let me ask you this. How many times was there ever a case, or how many times there was a case that you were absolutely 100% sure with your gut feeling that this is the right decision and you've been proven wrong? And from my end, so you don't feel bad.
Sure.
From my end, it's about I had less of them lately, but when I was up until like 7 years into the product management, I had that almost half the time. If I didn't have enough data to support my decision and I would go with the gut feeling, it was almost 50-50. So it's almost like I had no gut feeling at all.
Sure.
So what is it about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary thought because we try to do, well, I personally try to make sure all the features, the products that I roll out is solidified with some kind of data. But I've personally have an opinion. That's how I think about it. I have an opinion on a feature or some kind of request that has come in, and I'm waiting for the stakeholder or for someone to push me off of it, and we can have a discussion. I have my own opinion, and it's derived from data. It's derived from experience within the platform and everything I've gathered in life. And I have the stakeholder or whoever wants to combat that. Does that go right or wrong? Sometimes my opinion can be swayed, and I'm not batting 100. I'm sure of that. I can. There's been iterations, but I think one thing I've done recently is phasing. That has lessened the impact of failure in my mind. If we have a problem in a feature rollout that could take 3 months, I talk to the stakeholder and explain to them, hey, we can phase this approach out and minimize the risk of failure. Let's adopt this phase one, and I explain it to them. This accomplishes 80% of your request. And phase two, we can iterate and build upon it. But phase one, do we all agree with this process, this rollout? And for the most part, that has lessened the load on the failure on my end. I don't know. What's your thoughts on the phased approach?
I mean, that's the only approach for me.
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way. I've learned the hard way that it's we call them stages, not phases, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of like part of it is the thought behind the MVP, or some people use minimal marketable product, which is the bare minimum of features that market or your clients are willing to accept, and you build from there. And the beauty of it is you build and add to the product in such a small iteration, such small amounts of features that you can pivot at any time. You can always say, stop, let's turn around and do this, or let's turn around and do other things. And that allows you to, and that's kind of like what we argue is a benefit of adopting the product mindset, is because it costs less. You don't have to, have a vision of a future, year, 2 years, 3 years, God forbid, 5 years down the road. And you can, you're only good in, and that's what I wanted to talk about. How do you plan the roadmaps? And I'll talk about it later. But that allows you to be very flexible. So phased, staged approach is definitely a way to go.
Oh yeah, and that's been helpful to your broader question of how have I prevented that, and that's how I think my team has mitigated anything of huge failure and huge resources commitment into it. So yeah.
All right, so let's make a pause here, and we'll return after a short break.
Sounds good.
Hey, listeners, thank you for listening. This is Vlad, and I'd like to thank you for being a part of our audience. If you have any questions, if you want to be a part of this podcast, or if you want to introduce someone for our podcast to be a part of it, feel free to contact me at askvlad@vgrubman.com or vgrubman.com/podcast. Additionally, I'd really appreciate it if you guys promoted the podcast any which way you like, either a specific episode or the whole show. Since we're not asking you to donate anything, I'm not asking you to buy anything. It's really, free as a beer value. Hopefully it's not, whatever is free is worth what you pay for it. So let everybody know, tell your mom, tell your friend, tell your other friend. And hopefully we'll see more of you listening and providing feedback and having a dialogue around product management and all the other disciplines that touch product management in the technology world. Thank you again, and keep listening. All right, this is part 2. Richard, hi again. Thanks for coming back.
Hey, yep.
And let's move on. Let's talk about the next thing that is on my list, and it's something you've mentioned before. The question that I wanted to pose was, how do you, given that your developers keep getting these panic emails, urgent, and if everything is urgent, nothing really is. How do you keep your roadmap in check? How do you actually make things happen if your developers are constantly interrupted by all these urgent messages flashing in their faces?
Sure. I can talk about where the beginning has when we started service engineering and how I worked with the team to where it is now. When we first started it in a few quarters ago, the team, I would have a service engineering roadmap, and that would usually, I would commit things to that roadmap for 80% of our capacity, what resources I had out of the engineers. And that would constantly bite me in the butt. I would have said, hey, here's the X features to the stakeholders. We will deliver it by end of Q1, for example. And when Q1 rolled around, we would often hear those fire tickets that come in, and we'd be deviating our own roadmap. And the purpose of the team was to accomplish and tackle those fires that came in. So it defeated the purpose of what the team was initially created for. And as the quarters went along, Q2, Q3, I think myself and the engineering manager I work with, we learned that we cannot commit double digit or 80% to 100% of our capacity at the beginning of the quarter in the when we started developing the roadmap. We slowly realized we should commit to a quarter of what we're capable of for that quarter, and things would automatically essentially trickle in. Urgent emails and so forth would just trickle in, and we would cover the 100% of resource that we had for that quarter. I think over time that has become a better cadence for us, for the engineering manager to understand, hey, here's the amount of engineering resources we have. Here's all the products and requests that is coming down the pipe. Let's commit to 20%. And as the team grows, let's commit a little more, little bigger scope. So yeah, that's how it's kind of derived over time.
Wow. You went from 100% to 20%.
To 20%. No, it's a big shift.
Yeah, well, it's not a positive, the big shift, not in a positive way, at least from my perspective. But, you can argue that it's a normal thing because you've tried to do things and then you realized you were overcommitting.
Yeah,
it's not that you're not delivering enough. You're overcommitting.
Yes,
because there are other things. So my understanding is there's a way out of this. You guys are delivering more compared to what you used to.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do you move forward? I kind of like this form of asking. How do you move forward when your hands are full? So how do you move the product forward when you spend 80% of your time fixing bugs?
Yeah, I think that's. I leave that for the platform PMs that focus on where the platform will move and iterate to. For my team, and I guess I can speak directly for my team, we do focus on the shorter wins, the fires that come up, and smaller phases. We do develop phase one POCs, point of concepts, ideas, and then we hand it off to the larger team, other PMs, to actually tackle developing it out in the platform. A prime example was we did receive a request for something that could take a year for our whole company to invest engineering resources, people's time, and that was a task that we picked up. We said, hey, we can do a POC. We can present something to the exec and say, hey, should we actually commit a year of engineering resource to develop this new product, this new idea? We took it on, developed it within a quarter in our quarterly roadmap. And we actually were able to save our company a year of engineering resources. And we tackled that. So beyond just tackling defects and small feature wins, we also are capable of doing, or the team was developed to be more POC focused, MVP focused, I guess, in essence. So I guess moving forward, how we change and how we actually accomplish more. I think it's a collaboration between the platform roadmap and service engineering. How can we work together to move the platform forward? Because we have a lot of insight. And the engineers that I've worked with, they have insight and they've moved from service engineering over to platform engineering. So that's how they level up internally in their career ladder and so forth. So there's some incentive for them to move on. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you grow with the product and once you figured out what the underlying problems were or what the fires were that you had to put out, it's easier for you to design. As you design the product, you keep in mind that, hey, last time we tried something like that, it generated, this whole firefight that nobody wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. So, as a whole, I think I understand. It's not very typical, at least not in the way I have seen it happen. Although I do see from time to time teams having similar breakdown when one engineering team is set up as a product support team or engineering support, and the other one is focused on the actual product development. It's rare. I mean, again, from my limited experience, I haven't seen teams that are on the support side being called a product team. So, I mean, they're a product team in agile sense of the word, as in they're utilizing agile and they utilizing some kind of a agile approach, but they're not really product teams in the sense of developing the product. They're firefighters, right? They're not architects and house builders. They're firefighters. They're saving houses. They're not building them.
Sure.
And in that sense, it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting symbiosis, and I keep seeing things like this popping up. Things like this being non-classical approaches or some kind of a symbiotic relationship between teams that are kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Marriage of convenience, I guess, would be a good one.
Sure. I think it's necessary, and like it's necessary in this world. At least I see it. It's beneficial. It calms the nerves of the execs. There's a win-win across the board. There's architects that does focus on platform and product, and then they can actually influence how service engineering develops smaller wins or smaller defects. So I think it's beneficial from all the other PMs I've talked to, other smaller startups that are encountering this.
Interesting. No, I'm not. Again, I don't know enough to say it's better or not.
Yep.
Again, based on my experience, I've seen different things.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why we have guests on this podcast is that you guys have different experience, and we both come out hopefully smarter, at least in some way, out of this. And I'm really happy that you guys find collaboration in terms of you're not in kind of this situation when I don't care about quality of this. There's other team that will fix it. They're smart enough, they'll fix it. Yeah, I'm happy that you guys are actually collaborating, and you see this as a mutually beneficial or win-win relationship when they can rely on you to pick up things that inevitably fall through the cracks, and you can rely on them, knowing that they will design to the best of their abilities. So if something actually falls through the cracks, it's not due to the negligence or due to the lack of attention. It's because it's genuinely fell through the cracks.
Sure.
Okay. Moving on, I'd like to kind of bring back one of the things you mentioned, because it's the area that is really interesting for us people who host this show, and it's especially interesting in these trying times when everybody's working from home. I would like to bring back, you mentioned that your remote team is Puerto Rico?
Yeah, Costa Rica. Yeah,
Costa Rica. I apologize. Costa Rica. Can you tell me, what does your experience look like working with them? And my understanding is you're 100% remote. How do you guys? It's not about tools. I don't care if you use Slack or Microsoft Teams or Skype. I care about the relationships. I care about how do you work? How do you make things done? How does that whole thing work out for you, being the remote product manager, the team that's, I don't know, 1,000 miles away?
Yeah, no. I think when we first introduced the idea of Costa Rica, luckily their time zone is central. It's 2 hours ahead of San Francisco. Right now, I learned we're only an hour away with daylight savings time, so it shifts according to daylight savings. But it helped being that the engineering manager I work with is also based out of Austin. They work closely together. There's no time change for him, and the team over there is relatively young. They're still early in their career. They're software engineers at other firms, and then they kind of banded together. Costa Rica, what I've noticed, the difference between the San Francisco engineers and the engineers I work with, outside of a few handful, and they do evolve, become more self-sufficient. The engineers that I've worked with in Costa Rica have been more reliant on the PMs deriving what the view of what they're developing is. They want to hear more of what technical solution will look like. Instead of the engineers in San Francisco, they want to hear more of the problem, and they'll run off and build it and design it accordingly. for me, it's a nice breath of fresh air in that sense that, hey, I've worked with the designer. Here's the wireframe. Here's the phasing that I see. Do you guys agree? Can we work together on this? But tooling wise, it's really open. Whenever they have a question via Slack, I jump quickly on a Zoom. It feels very close, where we're really closely knitted. I visited Costa Rica about a month ago, and when I saw them in person for realistically the first time for over a year, it was really normal. We spoke so frequently on a day-to-day basis that when I saw them in person, it was like I knew them. It was that kind of relationship, even to thousands of miles away. So yeah, it was a fun collaboration, walking them through how I think in person. So yeah.
I see. Interesting. So it's interesting. I had a lot of experience working with remote teams back before it became a thing. I had my own company that basically the irregular outsourcing thing.
Sure.
We've talked, and I hired people all over the world, literally all over the world. And it was not even a voice communication back then. It was very problematic. It was just typing, a lot of typing, and a lot of conversations through just written text. Then we moved on to voice communication. Now you can have video pretty much in any part of the world. So it gets easier with the time.
Yep. What
would you say the biggest challenge is if you're talking about different geographical regions? And if I can, if I may, I want you to think about it not necessarily a technical challenge, they have slower internet or something like that, more like a cultural thing. Like they treat certain things differently from you, and you treat things differently from them.
Yeah, I think time zone wise, India has been slightly difficult. In San Francisco, they're hours ahead of us. I think culturally wise, the team there their working hours, at least the ones that we've worked with, their working hours might differ. They're not a 9 to 5 work business hour type of path there for their engineers. They come online, they code, they do their daily stand-ups, and then they go home, eat. I feel like they have more of a blend between the business and social, so they're more flexible. I took a call earlier today with a team in India, and it was midnight, and they were happy and to both get on a call, and it seems to be the normal culture. I could be very wrong, but that's that's what I've seen so far. It's interesting. They've kind of adapted to what the SF culture is like. They've adapted to our time zone, I guess is probably the better statement, at least for the people that I've worked with.
Wow, that's definitely interesting. Definitely different from what I've seen. And being originally from Eastern Europe, when I was starting back when I had my own business, I tended to hire people from Eastern Europe because we shared the same language, same legacy, same kind of history.
Sure.
It was funny that when I just started doing that, everybody was very eager to work whatever hours I needed to work. So let's say if I needed them to work early morning hours, they were okay with that. If I needed them to work a late night shift, they would be okay with that. They would adjust.
Right.
Then some time passed that I didn't have any exposure whatsoever to outsourcing or offshore development. I was working with everything was inside in-house teams. Then I came back to it at a couple of companies, and the situation completely changed. No one ever cared about what my hours were. They had their 9 to 5, and that's it. If I wanted to get their attention, I needed to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get in there, stand up. And get in there, stand up. My boss, CIO, at the time, he was getting up at 4:30 at 5 in the morning so he can make it to most of their activities. That was kind of a different story.
Right.
He was very much into micromanagement, so he would be on every daily stand-up and CIO of a company, and every little thing, every meeting, everything, he had to be there. And it kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're in the every meeting, then nobody makes any decisions unless you're in the meeting, and now your presence is mandatory.
Right.
But again, it's a whole nother story. But the culture was completely different. Like, we don't care what your hours are. Hours are 9 to 5, 10 to 6 if you really ask for it. But then that's it. We're going home. And I was wondering if you have seen any shifts like that in your experience.
Not in my experience. I've seen more the teams be flexible. It seems like their work-life balance is more blended. At least the engineers that we worked with in India and Costa Rica, we do have a team in Australia, and they do hold that strict time frame you had mentioned. And I don't know if it's more established or the leader that's running the Australia team is more stringent on work from 9 to 5, and all the PM managing their workload will have to play around with their schedules and pick up calls then. So I don't know, how does your team with the CIO, were they based out of Eastern Europe as well?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, CIO was here in New York. I was here in New York. The dev teams were all in Eastern Europe.
Right.
And the problem was that there was only so many hours in a day, like 3-4 hours in a day, that you can have all these meetings. And they actually wanted to have some work done.
Sure.
And you basically, that's why things took way longer. And that's kind of like your remote work experience. Things took longer, not because the team was not productive. Wrong choice of words. Not because the team was not productive on the technical aspects of things. It was because team was not productive in making their own decisions, or was not enabled to make their own decisions. So everything had to be vetoed or approved by just a couple of people. Let rephrase that. Just by a handful of people. It needs to be approved by a handful of people.
Sure.
And that was kind of a bottleneck.
Yeah, it seems like that's an interesting bottleneck. Yeah.
But that's more toward more speaks more towards the management style rather than teams way of doing things. But it is what it is. So while we're talking about while we're staying on the topic of working remotely, obviously, given that this is March 2020, or this episode is probably gonna get out in April 2020.
Right.
What are your thoughts on working from home versus working from office, where you can at least see some of your colleagues, some of your peers in the office? What are your thoughts on doing this completely in a complete isolation?
I think personally for me, I enjoy going into the office, seeing things change, talking to stakeholders, here, and just being in the ground floor. That has helped a lot with my growth. Just being next to the sales team, seeing what they're selling, being close to the engineering groups, asking questions in an ad hoc kind of way. Being remote or being working from home, it's nice that I don't have to travel or 30 minutes to go to the office, but there's a slight difference. Personally, I enjoy being in the office, even though I'm sitting there and on headphones. I still feel comfortable around other people working. But my whole team is remote, so to say that's necessary, I don't think it's essential for this team.
Okay, I was more interested in like your personal experience, personal feeling. I understand it's not necessary for the team. It's more of a, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
So that's the question, really. How does that make you feel when you're not there?
Well, I guess feeling wise, I feel like there's certain conversations that are happening right now in backdoor conversations in Slack channels, things that I'm not privy to. And I think the information is not there. In the office, I can hear conversations happening here and there, and I can chime in and help resolve it, or chime in and clarify certain things. Those conversations are now completely gone in ether, in the air. Either they're not happening, or they're happening in a manner that's not. That's my feeling. I feel like there's there's I'm missing out on something. I guess that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, it's actually a thing. There's a word for it. I think FOMO is the abbreviation.
Yeah.
Fear of missing out.
Right.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that you brought up these like small conversations. There was this book I read, and I don't mean to promote it. It's just I kind of liked it. That's why I'm talking about it. And I think if I'm not mistaken, it's called turning the ship around or turn the ship around, something like that. One of the thoughts or one of the main methods of making things happen right was having these small conversations when you don't have to call in a meeting to discuss something, when you can just talk to a person or a group of persons in the hallway and resolve it. And the book is actually about a nuclear submarine in U.S. Navy, how they, technically speaking, how they implemented agile methods in running the submarine. To simplify this story, and one of the things they praised really high was having these small offsite conversations, and they do help. By only absolutely, they help.
Oh yeah.
We're almost at the time of our second segment, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to ask me a question if you have any, and hopefully it's a question that I can answer in a couple of minutes. And as I keep saying, let's not solve the world hunger just yet on this episode. But if there are any if there are a question or questions for me that you would like to ask, by all means, this is your chance. This is your opportunity.
Yeah, I had a few. I'm curious how, since you've worked at many products, product roles, there's certain products that exist in the market, and if you're an owner of a product and it eventually goes away, expires, cannibalizing an old product and moving on with the new iteration or something completely different. How have you cannibalized old products? What's the best rollout? What models have you seen successful and fail and so forth? Have you seen that in your past?
Yeah, yes, definitely. And I wouldn't call it cannibalizing because, and again, just because of the experience that I had, it's the next version, next release, or new product that kind of a descendant of the previous one. So it's definitely not cannibalization. It's more of a one generation is passing and new generations taking over, because the old generation is incapable of doing things that are needed now.
Sure.
And I've seen this a couple of times. One was my own product, V1, so to say. And what happened was it was developed in a rapid application development tool. So there were a lot of limitations around how things were done, how things were built, and how things were deployed. And it worked as a prototyping and first iteration and basic MVP type of a thing. But once we figured that this approach works, once we've figured that we're on the right track, we're doing everything right, we've succeeded in identifying the solution to the need of a customer, the decision was made to expand the development team. Now we had a lot more resources, so we can instantly we had a capacity to build a more sustainable model, code that's easier, better managed, and that is more sustainable moving forward, because you can only in that particular rapid application development environment that we were using at the time, making changes was really cumbersome.
Got it.
So every time you needed to go from dev to stage to production, it was a hassle, probably worse than you would have in the regular pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. And eventually, we came to the point when the risk of breaking something in production was far greater than a probability of deploying something successful.
Okay.
And we kind of saw that happening. It was a pretty close call at some point. So we figured, if we know that this is scaling, if we know that this is a solution that we're going to need for multiple use cases. Why not start early, invest early in building a sustainable, scalable solution so that we don't have to resolve this later when it's going to cost us 10, 15, 20 times more. And that's what happened to that particular product. It was kind of phased out in exchange for something more robust and easier to maintain. Another example was a legacy product that was about 15 years old.
Okay.
It's a desktop application, and everybody wants to work on the phone or a tablet, and nobody wants to work on the desktop.
Yeah.
And however, the problem was that there were so many legacy features. There were so many things that were built on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. So it's kind of like that, old building. If you start scraping off the paint off the wall, you start finding old wallpapers. Under those wallpapers, you see some pages from magazines. You see some newspapers from last century. You keep digging, you keep uncovering more interesting stuff, but all of it is useless. All of it is all of it needs to go. You need to start from scratch, and that's what company did. They started building a brand new thing. Of course, not without their own set of failures, but at least it was a more contemporary solution. At least it was working on mobile. At least it was working on contemporary hardware with more modern methodologies built in.
Sure.
So again, it was more like a generations passing and new generation taking over, because it was more, now it reached the maturity stage, and now it can safely take over what your granddaddy did.
No, that's good. That's a good approach. I mean, that's great to hear your experience through those processes. Yeah.
Okay. Glad I was able to answer that. Any other questions? Anything else?
Yeah. I spoke about during my talk earlier about consumption adoption into a feature. What models have you seen work and fail? You've built the feature out, and you have stakeholders and users that don't actually consume that. What models? How can you force that? Maybe force is a strong word, but how can you guide them to start using that functionality, though they requested it months ago?
That is a great question. Yeah. So, for me, the problem is not adoption. Okay. The problem is delivery cycle is too long, and you need to keep asking why. Okay. Why did they request that feature several months ago? What was the problem they were trying to solve? And hopefully, because you've already developed that feature, you should already have the answer to that.
Sure.
And then when you start approaching the delivery, technically you need to do these sync ups pretty often.
Oh yeah.
In my playbook, the one that I'm kind of developing and standing behind, it's at least monthly. So if you didn't catch that, you mentioned several months, right? Yeah. So if you haven't caught that in any of those monthly sync ups, it means either nobody really cares about your monthly sync ups, or something just happened, and it does happen. Like coronavirus happened, right? Things have changed. Same thing when legalized marijuana was introduced. There was a surge in apps that allowed you to process transactions, and then a new legislation came in, and now you have to, if you want to trade in that merchandise, now you have to track literally everything. It was worse than HIPAA compliance, and it's like overnight the market died. So there are certain things that can happen pretty rapidly, and you don't have time to respond to them, and that happened. So you need to keep asking why. Why did they care about it 6 months ago, 3 months ago? Why they don't care about it now? What changed? What happened? And once you have those answers, it would be easier for you to understand how to guide them into using or adopting this feature or this application, this capability. It could be that it's not relevant anymore. You late. You took too long to develop. Unfortunately, these things still happen, and it's a sad truth that, oh wait, you just wasted a whole bunch of resources for nothing. It could be that they perceive it as useless now, but there's a way to change things, and there was a way to reposition it. And it also does happen. Like I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but I have something tangentially relevant in my mind. There are certain, like, I was developing a prototype of a solution that had 15 different capabilities, and everybody said you only need 2 or 3. Throw out everything else. And I was really upset with that. Turns out the amount of information that those 2 or 3 capabilities were bringing in was overwhelming already. So whether I had those 15 or not, nobody would be using them because of information overload. We needed to train our users to absorb the initial stage, the initial phase of the product before we could move forward. So basically, in other words, market was not ready to use those features, and that's kind of same thing. So your market need to be ready. You can't be the only person who can read your own handwriting. You have to have other people be able to figure it too. So why? There's the 5 whys, and that should land you somewhere around the solution, somewhere in the vicinity of, okay, I see what the problem is. So how do I tackle it? How do I approach it?
No, that's a great way to frame it. It's always chaotic, I guess. I don't think there's a one solution, and it's situational based. So it's fun to discuss.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I agree. Yep. All right. So hopefully that was useful for you as it was for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Hearing about your part of your side of story, and hearing about your very interesting symbiotic relationship between your product teams. Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate you being a guest on our show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you very much. I hope this is not the last time.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
You've been listening to The Real World Product Management, and I've been your host, Vlad Grubman. Until the next time.